Toward the end of The Rise of Skywalker, we witness Ben Solo reviving Rey, trading his life for hers. His body then disappears and we are left to believe that he has become a Force ghost. But what if I were to tell you that Ben Solo is alive at the end of the film? Hear me out. So in this scene where Ben supposedly dies, he and Leia transcend into the Netherworld simultaneously. They both become Force ghosts, Leia immediately after Ben. The order in which they disappear is actually significant. It's safe to assume that they both became Force ghosts, at least for a moment, since they both disappeared. And yeah, this was a cool way to show things on screen, mother and son disappearing together to live on forever in the other realm, but something about this sequence of events just doesn't make sense. Leia had been dead long before Ben passed, and as we know from past Star Wars films, Force ghosts don't hang around after they die. If you have the ability to become a Force ghost, you transcend immediately upon death. We saw it with Obi-Wan, we saw it with Yoda, we saw it with Luke, and then we saw it with Ben Solo. So my theory is that either Anakin or Luke, or maybe the Force itself, or maybe Leia was fighting to keep her spirit alive. But one of them, or maybe all of them together, were holding on to Leia's spirit because they knew that Ben Solo's death was imminent, but they wanted to see exactly how his fate would turn out. In the end, Ben makes the ultimate sacrifice, trading his life for Rey's, and he proves his commitment to the light. So as Ben dies, I believe Leia's body transcends with her son's in order to save him. Her final sacrifice is to trade her life for his. If Ben truly were a Force ghost, he would have appeared to Rey on Tatooine. Of all the people Rey would want to see in that moment, I believe after what they had been through together, she would want to see Ben, probably more than anyone else. And he would want to be there for her. The only logical reason for him not to be there is that he is alive. I mean, if Ben really were to die at the end of the film, the sacrifices that his parents and his uncle made for him throughout these 3 movies were all in vain. If we recall, Luke tells Rey that Leia gave up becoming a Jedi on the final night of her training because she saw that her becoming a Jedi would lead to her son's death. Then when Han meets Ben on the Death Star, he says to his son, "Kylo Ren is dead. My son is alive." So Han's proclamation that Ben Solo has returned, and Leia's ultimate sacrifice both in giving up becoming a Jedi and in giving her life to her son to turn him back to the light, would be all for none if he was to die shortly after. Yeah, he helped destroy Darth Sidious, and yes, he saved Rey at the end of the movie, but he is still dead. This character who had lived such a depressing life had finally found a glimpse of happiness when he chose to do what was right, and he's rewarded with death? No. Ben is out there somewhere, almost certainly looking for Rey, and if he is alive, you can bet these 2 characters will reunite sometime down the road. To kill this character whose story with Rey seems to be just beginning would not only be bad writing, but it'd be an overall poor decision by Disney from a money-making standpoint, as we know that out of all of the characters in this film, Ben Solo is one of, if not the, fan favorite. There were plenty of more definitive ways that they could have killed Ben Solo at the end of this movie. They left the door cracked open for a reason, and the clues are not hard to see. However, if my theory does fail, we do also have the Force bond between these 2 characters to fall back on, which Palpatine says has not been seen in generations. This Force dyad between the 2 characters allowed them to perform stunts that we have never seen in Star Wars, and it provides an even easier explanation for why Ben Solo lives if my theory for some reason falls through. You could argue that Ben gave his last bit of life to Rey, so he now lives in her, but there's just a more intriguing and satisfying approach to this story, one that makes more sense and lines up perfectly with the sequence of events that happens at the end of this movie. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this theory in the comments section below, and I would love to hear any new theories you guys may have to offer on how Ben Solo survived, or on anything else you may want to discuss in this movie. And of course, may the Force be with you, always.